This is Seventh Generation Warfare, and I am your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be looking at the seasonality of families. If you have watched this channel from the beginning, then you've heard me say the sayings shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, or the saying of the Saudi who said, my grandfather rode a camel, my father rode a camel, I ride a Mercedes, my son will ride a Land Rover, and my grandson will ride a camel. Or the saying, strong men create good times create weak men create strong times, etc. I don't actually agree with that, but that'll be for another time. The overall theme in these sayings is that families do not maintain the progress that they gain or have made. Uh, and that's what we'll be discussing in this episode. We won't be discussing the solutions, but we'll be discussing how to identify where your position is in this cycle. There's the ups and the downs. Where are you? So if you can identify where you are in that cycle, then you can stop the cycle. You can reset it. You can determine, if you know what kind of things make up a position in the cycle, you can reposition yourself. So it's a great tool for identifying where you are, but also where your parents were, or potentially your grandparents, and if you have grown kids, where they're at. So you can see trajectories also. And if you see trajectories, you can really start to see the landscape start to play out. And then, use that in your 7th generation war to determine how you want to go about tackling it, right? So, without further delay, let's talk about the seasonality of families. Simply put, there are 4 seasons to families, and they mirror the seasons of nature. The families will tend to go in a cyclical nature, spring, summer, autumn, or fall, and then winter. But this is not necessary to go through all the seasons. A wise person in the lineage can reset the family to whatever season they choose. And understanding the seasonalities of families is one of the ways that you can be wise, and you can do that. Also, a good spouse coming in from a different family with a different seasonality of their family might have the capacity to reset the seasons for their now shared family. So who you marry matters, because they're coming with values from a whole different family, and if that family has the strong family values of spring or summer, and your family's sort of on the decline of fall, or probably not winter, but then they might be able to pull you back. I'd like to point out that even within seasons, there's the potential for forward and backward progress as well. So, late March weather climate looks much different from early June, but both are spring. So you can have multiple generations within one season. It doesn't mean because this generation was spring that the next generation has to be summer. You could have, an early spring, a late spring. You could go back to early spring. You could jump to late summer. You could jump back to spring. You could skip all the way to winter if something traumatic happened. You can jump all over the place, but the general tendency, as those quotes I mentioned at the beginning suggest, is that there is an up and a down, right? And it usually takes place over 3 or 4 generations. So what do the seasons represent? Spring. Spring starts in the month of March, and there's the common saying for that month, in like a lion, out like a lamb. So coming out of winter, not everyone will come out of winter, but coming out of winter, generations who are early in this season will have seen severe hardship. It'll be imprinted in their minds, and avoiding the brutality of winter will be a major motivating force to grow. and growth, the establishment and growth is what identifies spring. It is in spring where roots are established that lead to immense growth later on in spring and into summer. These roots are strong values, confidence, and a can-do attitude, among other things. It's also the establishment of family values. However, before the roots are set, spring can still be a turbulent season. There can be late frosts, heavy rains, dramatic climatic events can wreak havoc on a person who's early in the spring, or somebody who's trying to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. That saying, pick yourselves up with your bootstraps, really is talking about people in spring. It's possible that people in summer or potentially even fall will talk fondly of a previous generation who did pick themselves up by their bootstraps, but they're not the one picking themselves up by the bootstraps. And people in late fall and winter won't have any capacity whatsoever to identify with that sentiment of picking yourself up by your bootstraps. So spring is the time that family values reemerge, though also can be turbulent, lacking, if they did come out of winter, lacking positive examples of family, from the generation before. You're kind of charting your own course. You might not be the best at how to conduct oneself in a family manner, but the family values will be setting down those roots. You will be starting to see those values take place. Spring can also be a time of strong individuality, and that works against the family because the family is a collective unit. And if you're fighting a seventh generation war, you're looking to help multiple generations into the future and also aid, carry on the lessons of the generations in the past. So seventh generation warfare is not individualistic minded. Somebody in spring might be, and that's what you see in nature. As when the plants start to bloom in spring, they go quick. They need to capture the real estate in the soil to get the nutrients of the soil, but they also have to get their canopy up to not be shaded out so that they can capture the sun. So that could be represented in spring in a mindset such as like I need to get mine. That drive to make for progress, to blaze a path. It can be a time of strong competition towards society, in making something of oneself, that pick yourself up by your bootstraps. In spring, the philosophies of the people will become practical, utilitarian, and reality-based. Since nature is emerging from the dark, drab winter where there is no character, everything's blah, everything's dead, into green, into life, things popping and merging, and birds coming in and chirping and and all that. It'll be once again easy to make distinctions, have discernment, be able to discriminate one thing from another, and objectivity will once again be easily had on a philosophical level. So this is not only the establishment of values, but the establishment of like one's mental capacity, one's philosophy, being able to understand the world in which they live, and that intellectualism will bring the benefits of summer. There are no lies in nature, and that is first seen in spring. So on to summer. Summer is the golden age for a family. It is the time when the sun shines brightest. The roots and values established in the spring still remain, but the turbulence of the early spring season has dissipated. It's fair weather. Because of this, spring and early summer, families may be humble. They will have put in the hard work uh, and gained from their hard work, but they might not actually have quite given themselves credit for their achievements yet. So there might be some humility in late spring, early summer, but by late summer, it's possible to have a lack of humility, and it's possible to take credit. If we're looking at multiple generations in summer, uh, you could see somebody in a family taking credit for their position, their wealth, the position of their family, when in fact it wasn't their achievement; it was the achievement of their parents, say. So lack of humility can be one of the things that brings somebody into the fall. Uh, so also in summer, values have had time to mature from spring, from first setting down the roots. They will gain complexity and depth. What may have started off as a simple belief will have branched out into a complex tree of knowledge. The hard work of generations past is starting to yield real rewards, and this is both materially and spiritually, mentally, in every way you can imagine. In summer, the strong family values obviously still remain, and yeah, people love family in summer. Since we're talking about the seasonality of families, summer's a golden age. Family is front and first and foremost in people's minds, but it can easily be eclipsed or fade out in the end of summer and bringing into the fall. This is will be the wealthiest time for the family, and it's also the most carefree. There is no scarcity, and everyone's needs are provided for. But this is also a curse, as hedonism will also start to creep in, and hedonism is one of the things that will undo a family. While in nature summer fades with the sun, uh, families a family's summer will fade due to issues with its value set, as we discussed hedonism and humility, but there are many more, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what undoes a family in the comments. On to autumn or the fall. I think the fall is a nice term to use for this. There is still the potential for late harvest in autumn. So a family can still have material wealth in autumn. Uh, Autumn is not defined by material wealth or not. It's defined by the values that are underpinning the families. So although you might be getting squash and apples and those late harvest yields in autumn, the underneath value structure is dying. Everything is dying back. And if you're paying attention to your family, you can see that what made your family great in past generations is no longer, and that the family is under attack from poor values. The wealth gained in this generation will also not last. Should your descendants find wealth of their own, it will likely have been by their own doing. They'll likely have, given up on the trajectory of the family and gone out on their own, developed that, individual sense that the spring offers, and reestablish new roots. Hopefully they'll have skipped winter, but they'll see, like, oh no, we need to go back to spring and set down our own roots. The roots that are in existing family are dying, right? So if your children do find wealth, it's not going to be carrying the values of the current family on. Most likely, the people in this generation have replaced the values of hard work and family values with the value of material wealth in one way or another. People of this generation are spoiled, literally, as things spoil on the vine. But in common use, the term spoiled or spoiled rotten is usually used to demean children. I don't think that children can be spoiled. I think it's the adults who are spoiled, as they are the ones with the responsibility and the agency to do otherwise. So it's the it's the parents who are spoiled. And I briefly mentioned this, while in spring there is a strong focus focus on the self to prove oneself. In autumn, there is a strong focus on the self to pleasure oneself. So this is the hedonism that will rot a family. Hedonism is a common practice in this season, but it becomes increasingly destructive to oneself and one's family as the season continues. Pleasure will be sought at the expense of proper investment in one's family. So whereas in spring one is focusing on self to pull one's family up with them, in fall people are focusing on oneself with disregard for one's family, and that will bring the whole family down. By late fall, the effects of winter are beginning to take hold in the family, and it is possible to start seeing divorces, children neglect, and abandonment in late fall. And so now let's talk about winter. In winter, the family is dead. In a mild winter, a family may continue genetically. There might be kids still being had. This would be like a tree dropping its leaves and going dormant. There will be a time where it'll get to blossom again, but you don't know how long that winter is going to last. But at least in that instance, there is still hope available to that family, that a future generation can find spring again and restart the growth. But in the darkest winter, nothing survives. This is childlessness. If you don't have children, the family is done. Should there still be a biological family, though, if you do manage to have kids in winter, there is no sense whatsoever of family values. The family is completely in a state of complete dysfunction. Families will be split by divorce. There might be absent parents. There'll be addiction. There'll be mental illness. All kinds of personal issues and family issues will reign supreme in this season. There will be no delaying of gratification. There is no forethought. There is nothing to work towards. This generation just is stuck. There's nothing that they can do that will make anything better for themselves or for their next generation. And this is why nihilism is a very common philosophy during this season. If you don't seem like you can make progress, then it's easy just to think that none of it matters. But good news is that now that we know this, now that we can identify this pattern, we can correct it. We can choose the season we want to live in. We get to identify the conditions. Now that we know this, we can identify the conditions under which our parents were raised and under which they provided for us. We get to decide what conditions we set for our children, and we get to fight a seventh generation warfare that is much more effective. So I hope you found this episode interesting. Thank you for watching. Please, please, please share this one, and also like and subscribe. This is Seventh Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson, and this episode was titled The Seasonality of Families. Thank you.